Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah amma ba'd. So before we begin with today's regalia, we are going to, because I promised the students earlier from today, inshallah ta'ala it's a beneficial story, to speak to them about the story of Abdullah ibn Hudhafa as-Sahmi radiyallahu anhu. So Abdullah ibn Hudhafa as-Sahmi, he is a companion of the Prophet ﷺ and a Muslim, very good Muslim. At the time, during the time of Umar, the reason why we mention this is because we were talking about how during the times of necessity, unlawful things become lawful. During the times of dire necessity, dire need, yani ad-darurat. This is a maxim in Islam that ad-darurat tubihu al-mahdhurat, that things, yani, during the time of a dire necessity, you can do something that typically is not allowed in Islam, right? So the example of this is if a person is lost in the desert, right, and he's dying of thirst, and then he comes upon somebody, and the only thing that this person has to drink is wine, as an example. And without this, he's going to die, he's going to perish, harm is going to befall him. Can he drink it at this point? Yes, he can. Sah? As long as obviously he's not saying, you know what, I'm going to put myself into trouble, and then I'm going to find randomly a guy who only has beer, and then I'm going to drink it. No, you can't do that. Okay, there can't be. And obviously, even in the hadith itself, it mentions that the person's heart is not inclined to that haram either. Does that make sense? But anyways, these are some of the requirements for this. So the reason why this came up is because we mentioned the example of this Sahabi, Abdullah ibn Hudhafa as-Sahmi. So what happened to Abdullah ibn Hudhafa as-Sahmi? Abdullah, he was sent as the leader of a contingent of soldiers during the time of Umar, when Umar radiallahu anhu was the Khalifa. And they were a small contingent of soldiers, and they got ambushed by the Byzantine army, huge army. And it is very rare, in fact it almost never happens, that Muslims are ever taken as prisoners of war. Right? Because in Islam teaches us that you shouldn't run from the battlefield, you should face and fight, and that if you fight valorly, you'll either win or you'll die, which means that you'll have shahada, you'll have martyrdom, etc. Right? But being taken as a prisoner is almost never a possibility. But because they were so small in comparison with this Roman contingent, they actually did get taken as prisoners. And so they were taken as prisoners, and they were presented in front of the Roman general at the time. And he realized that this old man, who was their leader, at the time he has gray hair, Abdullah ibn Hudhafa, gray hair, he's old in age. And usually they don't send people like this, that old, as leaders of especially in the army. But he's a Sahabi, and this was his honor. He felt that it was his duty, his honor, in order for him to do this. And he asks about him, and he finds out that this man is not just a regular Muslim, he's one of the companions of the Prophet. And so the general devises a plan, and he says, I want to convert this person to Christianity. Instead of prisoners of war back in the day, if you paid a ransom, they would pay a handsome ransom, and then you can get him back. But for the Byzantine Empire, they didn't lack money. They in fact had much more money than many of the Muslims ever had. And so for them, money wasn't that big of a deal to get back for this man versus what they could potentially get back in terms of if they converted this person to Christianity. And so they devised a plan in order to affect Muslims at the heart of what it is that they practice. Because this general understood a very sensitive thing that even Muslims sometimes fail to realize, which is that the victory that the Muslims always had on the battlefield was never because of their military might, was never because of how many numbers they had, wasn't because of their weaponry, wasn't because of anything like this. It was because of their iman, the faith that they had in their heart. That's what always guaranteed their victory. And so this general wanted to affect the Muslims' iman by converting one of their leaders. Do you guys understand his plan here? And he understood that if I can do this, this will demoralize the rest of the Muslims, and then they won't have that same certainty that they have when they fight against us. Okay? So he meets with him. Now he's a prisoner, he's in chains. And he says, look, I don't like to see you. You're an old man. You're in chains. All of these things. I have a proposition for you. He says, yes, go ahead. He says, if you convert to Christianity, I will let you go. You'll be free. If you convert, I'll let you go. You can be free. Your freedom is just for you to convert into Christianity. Do you agree to this? He says, I will never do this. He says, okay. Put him in jail. Let him think about it. He puts him in jail. Lets him think about it for a while. It doesn't work. He's there for a few days, not budging. Brings him back, meets with him again, and he says, Abdullah, I have another proposition for you. If you convert to Christianity, I will make you a leader of such and such an area. And you will have all the money that you want. You'll have all the power that you want. You'll have all the influence. What do you say? Abdullah says, Wallah, if you gave me the entire earth for me to leave this religion, I won't leave it. Put him back in jail. He puts him back in jail. He tries to entice him again. This time, enticing doesn't work. And so now he's going to use a different tactic, which is starving him. And this is where the issue that we brought up comes in forth. They put him back in jail and he says, starve him until he begs for food, and then we will decide. So they starve him. They don't give him food or water for a number of days. And he's an old man. And they come back to him and they say, if you convert to Christianity, we will give you food and water. He says, I will never convert. You already know this. I've told you this many times before. There's nothing that you can do to affect me in this. So they said, let him be. They still didn't give him food and water. And then they commanded one of the guards, the prison guards, to bring forth a nicely cooked pork ham, okay, and some wine. And they said, here, eat this. We're not asking you to convert. We're just saying you can eat this. And he says, I'm not going to eat from this. The prison guard says, it's okay for you in your religion to eat this now because you're on the verge of death. And you're so sick that you can eat this. It's fine. He says, I'm not going to eat. Even though I know that it's fine, and I know that if I eat it, Allah Azza wa Jalla will forgive me. But despite this, I am not going to eat it because I know that if I budge an inch, you guys will rejoice. Think about what he said. If I budge even an inch and I eat something that's haram that you guys want me to do, I'm not going to play your game. I'm not going to even budge 1 inch. And he says, I'd rather die before I touch this stuff. So he left it. They realized that he's about to die without him actually getting anything for him or for them to achieve their goal. So they give him regular food and water. And then they tell him, if you don't convert, we're going to kill one of your friends. Because remember, he had a contingent. Now they're threatening him with other people. If you don't convert, we're going to kill one of your friends. He says, go ahead and kill them. Allah Azza wa Jalla will give them Jannah. There's no harm. They came out in the army knowing what they would face. It's not a problem for us. Go ahead and kill whoever you want to kill. I mean, we're going to all die anyways. I'm not going to sell my religion no. And neither will they. So they realize they can't kill anybody because if they do, that's money lost and then they're not achieving their goal anyways. So they decided, we're not going to do this. They take him out and they said, we're going to kill you now. Khalas, we're going to kill you unless you convert. Okay. They take him out to a tree and they tie him up. They basically crucify him to a tree. And the general, in the narration, it says that he told his archers to aim around him in order to freak him out and scare him. Don't aim for him, aim around him. So they aim around him and they hit and he's not flinching. They thought that he would flinch, they thought that he would change. Nothing happened to him. And they said, convert. And he says, no, I'm not going to. They realized, khalas, this guy, there's nothing that's going to bend him. Khalas, what we're going to do is, we're going to kill him in a very gruesome manner. Because killing him with an arrow or anything like this is going to be super quick. So they said, let us bring a big pot of boiling oil, okay? And we're going to lower him into this boiling oil. We're going to basically cook him alive. And they tie him up, and they put the oil on the fire. They start to lower him, radiyallahu anhu. And as they're lowering him, one of the guards sees that Abdullah ibn Hudhafa starts to cry. He's actually crying at this moment. Tears are coming out of his eyes. And so he tells the general says, stop, stop, stop. Bring him back, bring him back. Why were you crying? Now he's still tied up. He says, he saw you cry. Why were you crying? Abdullah says, I realized in this moment, this is why I cried. This is what he's saying. I realized in this moment that I only have one life to give to Allah. And that I was wishing that I had more than one to give to Him. That one wasn't enough. And at this, the general didn't know what to do. Yani he's like, how can you change such a person? So then he says, and subhanAllah, this is a moment of arrogance to such an extent. He says, what if you kiss my forehead and I let you go? Would you do it? So Abdullah ibn Hudhafa there, tied up and everything, he says, what harm is going to befall me or my religion or my friends if I kiss this man's forehead? He says, you let me go and all of my friends? He says, yes, I will do that. He says, give me your forehead. He kissed his forehead and they let him go. And he marches back on foot without anything, him and all of the soldiers that were with him in his contingent, every single one safe. And they go back to Medina and they arrive. And now Umar has heard of news that they were captured, and Umar was getting ready to go and free them. And he was preparing an army and all these things because it's been weeks. And then he sees that they're coming back. And Umar says, what happened to you, Abdullah? And he says his story in front of everybody. This is why we have the story. It's an authentic narration. He tells his story in front of everyone. Umar approaches Abdullah and he says, you're going to sit in my seat. And he puts Abdullah in his seat. And then he says, it is a right, حَقٌّ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ أَن يُقَبِّلَ رَأْسَ Abdullah ibn Hudhafa. This is what Umar says. He says, it's a right, it's a must upon every Muslim to kiss this man's forehead. And I will be the first one to do so. And so he went and he kissed the forehead of Abdullah ibn Hudhafa, just as he had kissed that general's forehead. And then every Muslim that was there in the masjid, they went and kissed his forehead as well. Because for one kiss, he was able to save his whole army from death and from even conversion. So obviously there's a lot of lessons in this story. One is that sometimes the enemies of Islam want you to give up an inch for them to gain much more. And we shouldn't give in to these types of things as well. And obviously many of them realize that the core of the issue is not the numbers, it's not the weapons, it's not the tactics, it's the faith. And if they can shake your faith, khalas, they can shake everything. But so I thought that I would share that inshallah ta'ala today. With that said, we have the number 6th regalia, which is lowering one's wing. The lowering, this is called khafdul janah. In Arabic, it's called khafdul janah, which is lowering one's wing. This is a term that's used in Arabic. It's not a common term in English. That's why we're going to translate it inshallah ta'ala and break it down. So lowering one's wing. First off, this comes from 3 different verses in the Quran, this concept. The first verse is in Surah Al-Hijr, where Allah says, وَخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and lower your wing to the believers. The second time it occurs, وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ, and lower for them both the wing of mercy, or the wing of humility out of mercy. Who is both of them? It's talking about the one's parents. So for your parents, you need to lower for them the wing of humility out of mercy to them. So that's the second time that it occurs. The third time that it occurs, وَخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ لِمَنِ اتَّبَعَكَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and lower your wing to those who follow you from the believers. Okay? Lowering one's wing is a metaphor, kinaya. In Arabic, it's called kinaya, which is a metaphor. And it's a metaphor for humility and humbleness. And so the metaphor, we're going to expand on it here in a second. But what I want us to realize is that all of them are actually mentioned. The Prophet ﷺ is the one who's mentioned to do it. This is not a commandment to the believers. This is a commandment to the Prophet ﷺ primarily, and then obviously secondarily to the believers as well. But because it's to the Prophet ﷺ primarily, this begs this following question. If he's the best of mankind, yet he's commanded to do this, why? Because his status is where? His status is way above everybody else. Yet despite this, Allah is telling him, you need to be humble to the believers. You need to lower your wing out of humbleness for the believers, even though you are the best of mankind. And Allah says this in the Quran multiple times. But He's telling them, don't let that get to your head basically, and make sure that you're always humble when dealing with the believers. Now think about this, if the Prophet himself ﷺ was not humble when he dealt with the believers, with the Sahaba, would anybody have accepted Islam? If he walked around thinking, hey, I'm the best of mankind, I'm the messenger, I'm the best messenger, would anybody have believed in him? No. And his humility, in fact, is what attracted a lot of people to Islam. This is why it's so important for us as well, as ambassadors of the faith, that we embody this humbleness as well, this humility, especially as a seeker of knowledge. So this is why this is a very important regalia for the seeker of knowledge, to always be humble in the way that they act and they behave, in order to be respectable and all of these things. Never say, hey, I know better than you, you need to listen to me. Imagine if you said this to a person, are they going to listen to you? You say, hey, look, I'm the scholar here, you need to take what I say. Nobody's ever going to listen to them. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ himself, very rarely did he have to say, I'm the messenger of Allah, you need to listen to me. We can count these incidents on hand, and it was because the person himself was vulgar. Like when the person came to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and he says, Ya Muhammad i'dil, فَإِنَّكَ لَمْ تَعْدِلْ. When the Prophet was handing out some of the spoils from the war, right? The man tells Prophet Muhammad, oh Muhammad, do justice because you haven't done justice. A'udhu billah. The Prophet ﷺ asked him, if I am not doing justice, then who will? If I'm the Prophet and I'm not doing justice, then who will do justice? Nobody will. If he's not doing justice. Obviously, in accepting him as the messenger, as the Prophet, this entails that you have to believe that he does justice. Okay? So, the metaphor is that of a soaring bird. Okay? The metaphor, when Allah says, وَخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ, He's basically saying to the Prophet, and to anybody who follows the footsteps of the Prophet, that they are like a soaring bird. That automatically puts their status above the rest of creation, because when a bird flies, it flies above the creation. It's a beautiful metaphor. But He's saying, lower your wing. That doesn't mean lower your complete self. The bird itself is not commanded to land. Just lower your wing in order for what? For maybe you can grab other people with you and they can fly with you. Or in order for them to feel that they're on a same level with you in terms of their humanity, in terms of calling them to Islam and so forth. Okay? So like we said, the bird is high above the creation. Lowering one's wing entails that they're lifting them up as well through that knowledge. Also, alongside of this, Tahir bin Ashur and many others have mentioned this, is that the bigger and higher the bird flies, the less it flaps around and it prefers to soar. Sah? If you see little birds, they're flying all over the place, but a big bird with a lot of knowledge. Basically, he's saying that the size of the bird is like the size of the knowledge that that person has. And a lot of times, the more knowledge a person has, the more tranquil they are, that they're soaring throughout, that they're not all over the place. Okay, they'll be stable in their flight. If anybody has seen an eagle and how it flies, or a hawk, you'll know this very clearly. Versus a tiny bird here, you know what I mean, that flies around and is going all over the place. And so this is why stability and tranquility, waqar and sakina, tranquility and stability are very important to the student of knowledge, because it allows them to fly in such a manner as well. So it's a beautiful metaphor, the more you think about it. Now remember this, there's a sense of humility needed in order aslan to be a seeker of knowledge. Because if a person is arrogant, they will not seek knowledge. And this is why it says, the old adage, that humbling oneself, sometimes you have to swallow your pride and go to a class or learn from somebody or listen to something, right? You have to swallow your nafs for a moment or swallow your pride for a moment. For just a moment though, to gain some knowledge. But in doing so, you will save yourself from living an entire lifetime in ignorance. And that's how important it is. Don't let your pride get in the way of keeping you as an arrogant type of person. Okay, don't say, hey, I don't need to go to this lecture, I don't need to go and listen to this person, khalas, I can listen to this, I can do this, I already know. Because the moment you say, I already know, guess what? Shaitan has already got you. Because most of the Quran is actually about dhakkir, it's about remind, it's not about teach. There is some learning, there is some teaching, but a lot of it is actually just reminders. In fact, most of what we're doing here are only reminders. A lot of us actually already know this knowledge. Sah? And so the purpose is just reminders. And we all need these reminders. I'm the first one to say we need those reminders to come. And of course and it takes a sense of humility and not just saying, hey, I know this, but to think, am I actually applying it? Am I actually benefiting from this, etc. Okay? Now a person needs to beware of the opposite. So the opposite of humility and humbleness is what? It's arrogance and pride. What is arrogance? The Prophet ﷺ defined it in the best definition, and this is why we're going to go by the Prophet ﷺ's definition directly from the hadith, where he says, Al-kibru batrul haqq wa ghamtun nas. Al-kibr, arrogance is batrul haqq, which is rejecting the truth, wa ghamtun nas, which is belittling the people. Rejecting the truth and belittling the people. So, there's two elements. There's an inward element and there's an outward element. When dealing with Allah and dealing with the truth that I find, my arrogance can get in the way of me accepting something as being the truth. If I, for example, adopt some opinion and then later on I find out, hey, maybe I was wrong in this, and I change my opinion because I see the truth now in it. Before, for example, just as an example, and I don't want to open up this discussion, but just as an example, this comes to mind. Before, I used to be of the opinion that all gelatin, regardless of its source, was halal, was fine. Because of a concept known as istihala, which is if it changes so much from its original material, it becomes halal. And this concept is why vinegar is halal, but wine is haram, even if the vinegar came from wine. So if vinegar came from wine, the vinegar no longer intoxicates you, and it's completely changed chemically, physically, even in its effect, it's halal. This is called al-istihlal, something haram, and then we changed it and it became halal. And that they applied the same concept to gelatin. But later on in doing research and in talking to many people, I realized that gelatin actually doesn't change that much. It's merely a refining process, and then it can still be tracked back to its source. So I changed my opinion, and now I think that any gelatin that comes from an origin of pork is haram. Unless it's the only, for example, source when it comes to like medication and so forth, then that's an exception. But generally speaking, this is the rule. Sah? In order for a person to be able to change their mind, and especially see the truth, you do have to lower that amount of pride or arrogance. You say, no, I'm going to follow this, I don't care. You know what I mean? I'm not going to accept, and so on and so forth. This becomes very dangerous. This is why we always have to be aware of, why am I making this decision? Am I doing it because of my pride and my arrogance, or am I doing it because, no, I'm following the daleel wherever it takes me. I'm following the proof wherever it takes me. I follow the truth wherever it takes you. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he says, arrogance is accepting the truth, no matter where it comes from. Sometimes it might come from a person who has less knowledge than you, and sometimes it might come from a person who has more knowledge than you. But we still have to accept the truth. Make sense? Then there's the outward element, which is dealing with people. If I belittle others, then I have put myself above them, and this is arrogance as well. So there's two elements of arrogance. This second part of arrogance in Arabic is called al-khuyala. In Arabic it's called al-khuyala. And this is why the Prophet himself ﷺ says in this hadith, "Man jarra thawbahu khuyala lam yanzur Allahu ilayhi yawm al-qiyamah." Whoever drags his garment out of khuyala, this is the outward arrogance, Allah Azza wa Jal will not look at him on the Day of Judgment. So if my garment is long, and it's long because I'm trying to be proud and arrogant, I'm trying to show off, masalan, I have so much extra, material on my clothes that I'm literally dragging it behind me. This used to be a sign of pride and arrogance. Back in the Jahiliyyah days, they used to make their clothes longer in order to drag, to show off, look, I'm so rich that I can afford extra material on my clothes, basically. Now, of course, we don't have that problem. We have a different problem, which is people's pants being way too long. You know what I mean? For the sake of cleanliness, if only for the sake of cleanliness, roll them up so that you're not tracking dirt into the masjid. That's all I'm saying for now. Okay? But that's a different topic. Allah says if you're dragging your thawb, your garment, whether it's pants or whatever it is, out of pride, Allah will not look at you on the Day of Judgment. Now if it's a different reason, if somebody's pants are long, aslan they bought them the wrong size, that's different. There's no pride there. Do you guys understand this point? Here there's an intention that's mentioned, and the intention is to show off. And so any type of garment that's meant to actually show arrogance becomes haram. If the person in their clothing even is trying to show arrogance, not beauty. Beauty is different than arrogance. And this hadith actually mentions that. A man came and he says, Ya Rasulullah, one of us likes to wear nice clothes and to have nice shoes. Is that arrogance? And the Prophet said, no, that's not arrogance, that's beauty. Arrogance is this: if your nice clothes and your nice shoes cause you to look down on someone else, then that's arrogance and pride. But if you see yourself as beautiful and you're not belittling others, you're not judging others based upon what they're wearing, then that's fine. And this can, by the way, happen not only in our clothes, it can happen in our homes that we buy, in our cars that we buy, in the phones that we buy, whatever it is that we buy. If it causes us to look down on others, you say, look at what this guy's driving. Man, no, you can't. You don't know what he's going through, you don't know his situation, you don't know anything like this. If Allah has blessed you with something nice, be thankful. And don't cause it to make you look down upon others. This is the rule. Allah doesn't dislike you to have nice things. He dislikes you to look down on others, right? So that's the hadith. Whoever drags his garment out of arrogance, Allah will not look at them on the Day of Judgment. So this is an outward showing of arrogance. Outward showings of arrogance are also included in this story. Amr ibn al-Aswad al-Ansi, rahimahullah. He is the son of al-Aswad al-Ansi, who was a Sahabi, so he's the second generation. He was seen holding his hand very awkwardly when he left the masjid. And people asked him, what are you doing? Why are you walking so weird? He says, I am holding my hand back out of fear that my hand should show hypocrisy when I walk. And he meant by hypocrisy meaning arrogance. There's an arrogant way to walk. There's an arrogant way to talk. There's an arrogant way to deal with people. And he wanted to avoid any outward display of arrogance. And you guys have all seen it. A person walks into a place like he owns it. And a person who walks into a place like he's just a regular guy. You guys know what I'm talking about. Some people are smiling. But this is the truth. There are people, who walk into their house even. And even that's dangerous. Even though, yes, you do own the house, who actually gave you the ability to buy the house and gave you the money to buy the house? So a person shouldn't even show arrogance even within his own house. Because any place that a person shows arrogance, it will be inevitable that Allah Azza wa Jalla will humiliate him in that same place. This is a rule. Any place that a person has shown arrogance, Allah Azza wa Jalla will eventually show him humility in that same place. This is why we have to be very careful when it comes to arrogance. So we have a question about arrogance. Can arrogance stop a person from seeing or accepting the truth? Yes, it happens all the time. In fact, this is one of the main reasons for a person to not accept the truth. So therefore, why is humility so important for the student of knowledge? It's because if you're actually truly a student of knowledge, you can't learn or accept another opinion or accept something new unless you have humility. Because that arrogance will always stop you from learning. So for the seeker of knowledge, it is crucial that they get rid of arrogance in order for them to actually learn or accept new knowledge. Can arrogance stop a person from acting upon one's knowledge? Let's say you have the knowledge, but can arrogance stop you from acting upon it as well? Yes, it can. Primary example, what is the first sin ever committed, as far as we know, as far as our limited knowledge? What was the first sin ever committed? Shaitan. And what did he do? He said, I'm not going to prostrate, I'm not going to make sujood. Out of what? Arrogance. Arrogance was the first sin, as far as we know. And that's why it's so dangerous. Was Iblis not knowledgeable? He was very knowledgeable. But that knowledge didn't protect him because of the arrogance. So this is why arrogance is so dangerous for the student of knowledge. Because if it doesn't stop him from accepting knowledge or from gaining it, it might stop him from also acting upon it as well. And that's why it is so dangerous. Like, how does a person protect oneself? This is a list, it's not a complete list, but these are some of the things that a person can do. Number one, swallow one's pride. Lowering oneself to the ground, meaning humbling yourself. Lowering oneself to the ground. Why the ground? In sujood, one of the effects of sujood that it should have on us is that it should humble us. Never does a person increase in their arrogance when they make sujood. They should actually decrease their arrogance when they make sujood. They should become more humble when they do it. They should become more tranquil, because you're actually coming close to the thing that you were actually created from. If we do believe that we were created from dirt, and we were, then coming in contact with the dirt or the floor should actually lead us to realize, man, this is where I came from. This is my origin, and I should contemplate that origin as well and think about where I came from. Think about the nature of my existence, who I was when I was a child. Why am I arrogant? Who I will become later on. And when I'm buried into the dirt, what I'll become. Why should I be arrogant? And then, more importantly, think about Allah Himself Azza wa Jal. The greatness of the Creator should cause every single person to never be arrogant ever. If we truly understand and realize who it is that we are dealing with. Okay? Because of this, because of arrogance, how easily can arrogance corrupt one's intentions? Very easily. And in fact, there's a danger in this, is that a person might start out with a good intention and then end up with a bad one. And this is why the danger of arrogance increases with one's knowledge. The more a person learns, the more susceptible they are to arrogance. Why? Because a person might think, hey, now I actually know more, and I know more, and I know more, and they might eventually be convinced by shaitan that they are actually better than some other people because of their knowledge. And so the more one learns, the more they should work on their intentions, and the more that they should work on removing arrogance from themselves. And this is the trap that many people have fallen into, is being fooled by shaitan that they are in fact better than who they truly are, and that they are not susceptible to his whispers anymore, or that they have more knowledge, or that they're better than anybody else. Just because you have more knowledge doesn't make you better than anyone else. What makes you better is whether you act upon that knowledge or not. It's not the knowledge itself. This is why it's so crucial for the seeker of knowledge to always remember this, is that arrogance doesn't go away. It in fact increases. The potential for it increases the more the person actually learns. Okay? This is why humility is one of the most important regalia a seeker should maintain throughout their life. You never stop working on your intentions. You never stop working against your arrogance as well. So how should a seeker be? This is a story that's mentioned by Bakr Abu Zaid in his book, where he says, Abdullah, and he is the son of Bakr ibn Abdullah al-Muzani, and he is Imamun Hujjah. So he's not only Imam, but a Hujjah. That means he was so articulate, he defended Islam on multiple occasions and so forth. He says that I heard a person narrate that when my father was standing on the Mount of Arafat, this is during Hajj, he became soft-hearted and said, if I wasn't among them, I would have said that they have been forgiven. So what is he saying? He's saying that he thinks that because of him, nobody was forgiven that day. He's seeing himself as being the worst person there. Even though he is Imamun Hujjah, he's a big Imam, he's an articulate scholar and all of these things, but because he had a true sense of himself and he knew who he was, he said that there's no way that these people are forgiven because I'm here. He always saw himself as the worst of people. And this is how the seeker of knowledge should try to be, is never assuming that he's better than anyone else. And in fact, assuming the opposite, that I'm actually one of the worst people here. And if we're honest with ourselves, this should always be the case. Okay? Imam al-Dhahabi, he commented upon this because he's the narrator of this in his book, Sir A'lam al-Nubala. He says, in this way the servant should pity himself and swallow his pride. Now a person can argue, isn't that Imam on the day of Arafah, when saying this, showing reverse show-off? He's doing a reverse show-off basically, where he's showing off in how humble he is. Sah? Do you guys understand this point? And he's saying this point in order to show off really how humble he is as a guy. He's not being boastful that I'm this scholar, but he's showing off his humility, when in fact everybody knows that he is a scholar. And the answer for this is actually very simple. Number one, a teacher can share these types of insights because even Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself used to share some of these insights as well. And if a person is not boasting about it and he's sincere, number two, and he's not boasting about it, and he's telling it to his students who can actually benefit, and he's not making it public or he's publishing it like, hey, look at me, how humble I am. No. He's actually sharing it with only a few select people, his students, in order for them to benefit and look up to him in certain ways. Then this becomes allowed in Islam. Does that make sense? So a person shouldn't go and brag about things that happen to him or the good deeds that he's done, but rather a person should try to hide this as much as possible and only mention them when there is actually more benefit to mentioning them, like to a group of students, like to a group of people who will actually act upon it, and when there's no pride or arrogance involved in it as well. Does that make sense? طيب. We're done with that regalia, which is the regalia of lowering one's wing. Any questions on that one, of lowering one's wing? Yes? Now? Oh, okay. You want me to go back? Okay, here's the slide. Here's the whole slide. Any questions before we move on? Any other questions? Yes? Arrogance and confidence. So, in Islam, arrogance is where it leads to reject the truth, right? And it leads to belittle others. Confidence shouldn't do that. Confidence should be within a person's self, where he's not comparing himself to other people, and he's sure of what he knows and sure of his capabilities. And the best example of this is Yusuf alayhi salam, when he met with the king of Egypt. And the king of Egypt, remember, he saw that dream, and he goes to him and he says, here's the interpretation of your dream, but if you want, I know exactly how to deal with this situation, and if you make me in charge of the khaza'in, right, of all the agriculture, all these things, I can do it for you. And I am trustworthy, nobody can attack me in my character, here's my capabilities, what do you think? And he says, yes, I will make you in charge. There was no arrogance. He didn't say, I'm better than other people. He said, these are my own capabilities, number one. Plus, he's not rejecting the truth. And it's not like he was seeking a position of power. The king is the one who came to him for help. This is why he's saying, if you truly want my help, here's what I can do. Because in Islam, we have a concept that a person shouldn't seek positions of authority or responsibilities. Right? But rather we should be tasked with them, or we should delegate them to people that we see that are qualified. Right? And so this is why Yusuf alayhi salam, he didn't necessarily ask for it, but he knew that he was qualified and that he could do the job. So but you're right, there is a fine line where it can cross it, and this is why a person has to constantly check their intentions in doing so. Okay? All right. So the next one that we're going to take today is the seventh regalia, which is the regalia of contentment and asceticism. Contentment is qana'ah, and asceticism is az-zuhd. In Arabic it's called az-zuhd. And these are two very important ones. Zuhd, which is asceticism. First question, what is the typical understanding of zuhd? When we hear of zuhd, what do we think of? A monk, living in a hut, right? By themselves, cut off from the world. They don't have a job, they don't work. They just kind of live off the land, right? And they worship all day. That's a form of zuhd, right? That's actually kind of an incorrect understanding of zuhd. But that's typically what's understood. Now, as Muslims, do we have any like monks in Islam? Or going to a monastery or anything like this, or just dedicating oneself to worship? So obviously zuhd is not going to be that, right? Where a person cuts themselves off from the whole dunya and just starts worshipping bas. And so Bakr Abu Zaid actually has this definition of zuhd. He said, zuhd is in the haram. not in the dunya. If you notice, he says zuhd is meaning asceticism, meaning you're staying away from the haram. You're not staying away from the dunya, because it says that the dunya ultimately you need. But he says zuhd is actually staying away from haram and to distance yourself from even its boundaries. So you know that the haram is here, but you're actually staying away from even that boundary. So you might end up leaving a lot of the halal in order to stay away from all of the haram. Zuhd is leaving some of the halal behind in order to stay away from all of the haram. So that's an extra cautionary step. We're not required to do it in Islam. You can do all of the halal, it's completely fine, but you need to stop at the haram. But zuhd is taking it a step further, where I'm extra careful in order to make sure that I never step into the haram. Does that make sense? So that's an extra step of zuhd. So you're also abstaining from anything shubuhat, anything that's doubtful. Anything that I have a question about, I don't know whether this is halal or haram. Immediately, if I am a practicer of zuhd, I'm going to do what? I'm not going to do it. It's shubha. It's a doubtful manner. I'm not going to do it. Now, if you know the answer, so something can be doubtful to one person, but to another person it's not doubtful. If it's doubtful to another person and not doubtful to you, do you have to still stay away from it? No, because you know the answer. You know that this is actually halal or this is actually haram. And then you can make your decision. So just because something is doubtful doesn't mean, for one person, doesn't mean that it's not doubtful to another person. Make sense? And this is why seeking knowledge and asking the people of knowledge will always help when it comes to the doubtful matters. However, this definition is closer to wara'. So Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, in his explanation of this, he says, this definition is actually closer to wara', which is where a person is extra careful in their religion. And he makes a distinction between the two, and you'll see these two definitions here right now written down. Okay? Al-wara' huwa tarku ma yadurru fil akhirah. Al-wara' is leaving that which does harm in the hereafter. Az-zuhdu tarku ma la yanfa'u fil akhirah. Leaving that which does not benefit in the hereafter. They're close, but they're not the same. One definition says, if it does harm, I'm going to leave it. Or even if there's a question of it, if it does harm, I'm going to leave it. That's wara'. Zuhd is actually leaving anything that doesn't benefit me. So there might be something that doesn't harm, but it also doesn't benefit. Right? There's a lot of things that don't harm me in the hereafter, but they also don't benefit. And if I leave something that doesn't really benefit me in the hereafter, that's actually zuhd. That's even a step further. That's taking it a step further than wara'. Zuhd is leaving anything that doesn't benefit me for my hereafter. I'm not going to waste my time on it at all. That's the true meaning of zuhd. Leaving that which does not benefit in the hereafter. Okay? We have more on a zuhd. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he was asked, and this is directly from the book, if a person sincerely advised the wisest of people, he would encourage him to be among the ascetic people, meaning by becoming one of them. If you want advice, he says you need to go to those people because they are the wisest people and you will become one of them. This is what Imam Shafi'i told some people when they asked him. Why did he say this? First off, we should know that this advice is not universal, as advice is always contingent on a number of issues, like the time that it was given, the place in which it was given, the person it was given to. Okay, and so today, in this day and age, the wisest people might not be the people who practice zuhd. They might be different people. Does this make sense? But zuhd, generally speaking, entails that this person has a level of understanding that maybe other people don't. Why? So why did he give this advice? It's because the people that practice zuhd have understood the reality of this dunya. Meaning they see that it's limited, it's temporary, it's not going to last. Why should I waste time on something that's not going to last? Okay, so they see beyond the mirage of this dunya and they see towards more the reality of the hereafter. That's why they practice zuhd. Zuhd is where they leave a lot of the dunya because it doesn't benefit them. They leave a lot of the things, the material possessions and a lot of the stuff because it doesn't benefit them. Okay? This is why zuhd is so important. We still have more points on zuhd. Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani rahimahullah, he is one of the students of Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa, after his death, rahimahullah, he had two main students. He had a bunch of students obviously, but the two main ones that actually carried the madhab beyond him, one of them was this man here, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani rahimahullah. He was asked by some of his students, will you not write a book on zuhud? We want you to write a book on zuhud. We see that he is a zahid. He was a practicing zahid. They said, can you not write a book on zuhud yourself? He said, I have written a book on transactions, on mu'amalat. It's a weird answer. Okay, but we're going to decode what he actually meant. What did he mean by this? He says, I wrote a book on mu'amalat. Mu'amalat, which is transactions, yani how to do business, how to buy, how to sell, how to rent, you know what I mean, how to trade, etc. And the idea is, it's because he who understands where the haram and the halal are, meaning with regards to the transactions deal primarily with what? With the dunya. And if a person understands in this dunya where the halal and haram are, he can put himself in a position to stay away from all of the haram and to stay away from all of the doubtful manners, which is the definition of zuhud. He understood zuhud as it is properly understood, which is leaving a lot of the doubtful manners, leaving anything that's haram, and practicing and only taking what I'm allowed to take. Okay? And this is why he says that he can also only utilize what he needs to build his hereafter, and not for the herein. Make sense? Based upon this, there's a question. In some of the narrations that we have, it is mentioned that Dawood alayhi salam and Sulaiman alayhi salam were of the best zuhad. They had practiced the best zuhd out of all of mankind. And I want us to contemplate on this because they were both what? Kings. They were both rulers. Yet despite being rulers, they were zuhad. How is this? They practiced zuhd. Remember zuhd we said is where the person lives a basic lifestyle. He's not indulgent. So how were they practicing zuhd? Even though they were kings. Because we know how kings live. Right? Even people who are not kings, who are wannabe kings, or are in the kingdom family, and we see how they live. So obviously this goes, these are two diametrically opposed concepts. How can a person be a king, yet be a perfect practitioner of zuhd? And one of the best answers is that despite Sulaiman alayhi salam building, and Allah mentions, Sulaiman used to build these huge places of worship, and these huge statues, and these big things, and the jinn would build them for him, right? But how is that zuhd? And it says because all of that was never in his heart. The dunya, the love of the dunya was never in his heart. And he never did it seeking a dunya goal. He did it to show the power that Allah had given him, to strike fear into the hearts of the others in order to establish his might and authority and dominion, etc. So the dunya was never in his heart. And he never sought the dunya for the sake of the dunya. And he was a king not for the sake of power and dominion and kingdom. He was a king to spread La ilaha illallah. There's a huge difference between the two. And this is why a person can be wealthy, yet still be a zahid. This is why we've seen many people, they're very humble in the way that they dress. They're not dressed in the fanciest clothes. They don't drive the fanciest cars, yet they are millionaires. In our community, I'm talking about here in Memphis, Tennessee. And they donate generously to every project that we have. Whether it's the masjid, whether it's construction, the school, you name it. They're always there ready with their wealth. And you would never know that they're wealthy based upon their outward appearance. And this is because, Allahu A'lam, we're hoping that this is the case, that their intentions were never for the sake of the dunya, it was always for the hereafter. And it shows. Okay? Zuhud entails that the dunya is not sought for itself, and the dunya is not ran after in the sense that a person might even consume it from haram in order to overcome it and etc. Okay? But the person pursues it for a lofty goal, and that it never entered his heart. And that's the true zuhud, is that the person stays away and abstains from the dunya in their heart as much as anything else. This leads us to qana'ah, and this is why he put them together. Qana'ah, which is contentment, where a person is content in this dunya. Okay? Bakr Abu Zaid, rahimahullah, he's the author of the book. He mentions his own personal experience with his teacher, Muhammad Amin al-Shanqiti rahimahullah. Muhammad Amin al-Shanqiti has a book of tafsir, many books. His book of tafsir is amazing. I use it all the time as a reference. It's an amazing book. Shanqiti means that he's actually from Mauritania. Shanqiti is an area that's in Mauritania. They're from Africa. He moved to Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of Shanaqita now that lives in Saudi Arabia, and many of them are still scholars and they teach. A lot of them are very, very well versed in knowledge. So he's one of them. He passed away a few years back. So he was one of Bakr Abu Zaid's teachers, and he was also Ibn Uthaymin's teacher during a moment of time and whatnot, and they both benefited from him greatly. So Muhammad al-Amin, many have said, by the way, that if you were to see him walking, you would think he's a poor Bedouin lost in the city. From the way he was dressed, and from the way that he would get lost so easily when walking through the city. This is because the majority of the time he didn't spend it on actually learning how the city worked or where it went. He spent the majority of his time in the books of knowledge. Okay? So this shows his level of contentment. Bakr Abu Zaid says about his teacher, he says that I saw him not able to differentiate between the different bills of money. So over there they have the Saudi Riyal, right? And he says, I saw him, he would get confused. Is this 100, is this a 50, is this a 20? He couldn't differentiate between the two, or between all of them. Meaning he didn't deal with money at all. Yani very basically just to get by his needs. And when it came to actual paper money, he would get confused all the time. Even though he was a scholar in the top sense. Yani memory that's incredible. And so he asked his teacher, he's like, Sheikh, this is embarrassing. Why can't you know, why don't you know about this money and stuff? He thought it was embarrassing to his teacher, right? And so then the teacher then explains this. And this is directly in the book, even in the English one that we sent out. He says, I came from my country, which is Shanqit in Mauritania, and with me is a treasure that is very seldom found in the possession of anyone. It is contentment. He says, if I wanted high status, I would have known the way to achieve it, but I chose not to exchange this worldly life for the hereafter, and I do not give my knowledge to attain worldly desires. He's telling his student this, because now he's put on the spot. He's like, why don't you know? He's like, this is what I don't know. I haven't dealt with the dunya at all, and I don't want to. He says, I haven't, that was never my intention. That's why he sincerely didn't know. I think contrast this to us, subhanAllah, today. You know what I mean? How guilty we are of not having this level of contentment. So contentment for the student of knowledge is so that they are not distracted with other things from their quest for knowledge. So the quest for knowledge should always be first and foremost. And being content is key to achieving this level of understanding. And that is why it is so important. Okay? So that is the last slide that I have for today. Anybody have any questions or concerns with contentment? Lowering one's wing, humility, contentment, qana'a, zuhd. Zuhd, I hope zuhd was very straightforward. Where a person can be wealthy and still be a zahid, this should be clear. Yes? The zuhd of who? Abu Dhar, yes. Yeah? No. Abu Dhar was a highway robber, right, before Islam. But he left that lifestyle, even though it was lucrative for him, because he became Muslim. Abu Darda especially was a businessman. And he actually sold his store, he sold his business, and he became dedicated to the Masjid, so that by the time the Prophet ﷺ died, Abu Darda was one of the few Sahaba who had the entire Quran memorized. Where Abu Darda before was a businessman, and he had a store, and it was a very lucrative business. He sold it in order to dedicate his time to the seeking of knowledge. Yeah, without a doubt. Because both of them were technically wealthy in some aspects, but they left it for the sake of seeking knowledge and being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yeah, of course, many of the Sahaba were zuhad. Think about Umar radiallahu anhu himself, right? Taking a nap under the tree, himself wearing a garment that they said he's the leader of the Muslims, that his garment had patches in it, right? Obviously, if he wanted to, he could take more of a salary for himself, and the Muslims would have been fine for it, for them to buy him a new garment, because he's supposed to represent the Muslims. Of course we can buy him a new garment if he's our representative. Yet he refused. And the Sahaba did offer it. They said, here, take this garment, represent us well. He's like, I'm going to wear what I'm going to wear. It doesn't matter. You understand this concept? So yes, many of them were practitioners of zuhd, without a doubt. Now, okay, good. Any other questions? From the sisters, any questions? Okay. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullah khairan. We'll see you, inshallah ta'ala, next week. We won't have class because of the ISNA conference. So next week we won't have the Regalia. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.